I think so. First time I've done it, so I hope it works.
What's your problem, baby? Don't touch anything.
All right.
Oh, I hope so. I hope it works. Fingers crossed.
Hello. Is that loud enough? Can you hear me? Hi everyone. I've just asked the family if they could just please come and take a seat up the front here, and then everyone else can just grab a few and then find somewhere to stand. That'd be cool. Thanks. Uncle Jeff, your sister said you got to come and sit up the front. Can you all hear me at the back okay? Is it loud enough? Wait for some stragglers. Okay, we'll get things underway. Just got a couple of apologies here I'd like to read out first. So I've got Mike and Maxine Davies, Henry and Natalie Watson, Shane and Sarah Goldsmith, and Warra and Lucy Huriwaka. Sadly they couldn't be here today, but they just send their best wishes. Welcome everyone to this very special occasion where we finally get to farewell a much loved father, grandfather, brother, uncle and friend, John Charles Freeman Smellie, affectionately known as John Boy. For those of you that don't know me, I'm one of John's many nephews. I quite often get told I look a little bit like my Uncle John. Let's just say what an incredibly good looking and handsome bloke he was. It's a real honour for me to be here, and so fitting that we're to be having this service here at a club that's played such a huge part in John and all our family's lives. John passed away in Australia a year ago on the 25th of March. He was over there getting treatment for cancer when he unfortunately contacted COVID, and this terrible disease took him from us far too soon. To wife Hina and his children, Javan, Jan, Jacinda, Jody, Joshua, Jason, Johanna and all his grandchildren, our hearts go out to you. I know how tough this last year has been for you all, but I also know how proud John would have been of you all for the way you have all honoured him in your own special way. I'd like to take this opportunity to make a special mention of two of John's children, Jody and Jason, who unfortunately are stuck overseas and can't be with us today. I know you're both tuning in. We send you all our love, and we look forward to catching up with you both when we next can. Jody, we want you to know how much we all appreciate what you did for your dad. Being the only family member that was there at the time, I know was very hard for you. We are all incredibly grateful for all that you did. We love you, Jody. Rugby was obviously a very big part of John's life. I was lucky enough to play some rugby with my Uncle John, along with some of my other cousins, the Mossy boys, Whitebait, and even his son Javan. I still remember Javan, in the mornings he would play first 15 rugby at school and then come out and play with his dad and cousins in the afternoon. Those were the days. He's a bit more talented than us. He used to play second five, or no, he used to play hooker for the first 15 and then come out here and play second five. To say John was a hard, uncompromising, intimidating player is probably a big understatement. As many of you that either played with him or against him would know. There are endless stories that could be told. I will share one. I remember watching one of the last games John played for Hanyarira against Kirione out here. Kirione was a very strong club back then, and they had an ex-All Black lock, Buck Anderson, coaching and playing for them. At line-out time, one of our boys stole a couple of line-out balls off Buck. They didn't like that so much, so as soon as the ref wasn't looking, he smacked our lock and said, "Don't you steal my line-out ball again, mate." Before he had finished his sentence, he found himself lying on the ground with John Boy standing over him saying, "Don't you ever hit my mate." You did not mess with John Boy. I'd now like to call on one of John's sisters, Jill Bigham, my mum, to come up here and tell us about John's early years.
John Boy, Johnny, Blackjack. Sorry. John Boy, Johnny, Blackjack. John was born in Dunedin on the 11th of May 1950. He is the fourth child in our family of 6 J's. Jocelyn, Judith, Jill, John, Jeffrey and Jeanette. Our parents were June and John. There was great excitement when he was born, the first boy after 3 girls. When our mum was expecting me, her mother was dying of cancer at the time. She told her just before she passed away that she was expecting. She said, "I hope it's a boy," but it wasn't to be, it was me. The night he was born, our grandfather had been celebrating the arrival of his first grandson. Our grandmother was looking after us girls at the time. She sent Grandpa out to the farm to get the cot for me. He put the cot on the back of the pickup and forgot to secure it on. He arrived back at our grandmother's and there was no cot. It had come off somewhere in the main street of Green Island. He certainly heard about it from our grandmother. When John was nearly a year old, our parents decided to move to the North Island to start a better life for their young family. When this happened, John and I went to live with our Auntie Rata in Auckland until they got settled and another son arrived 14 months later after John, Jeffrey. John started school at Puketaha. We used to ride a Shetland pony to school. John would ride on the back behind one of us girls. This is where Jeanette was born. John was always accident prone, always getting into trouble. Somehow, after we moved to Gordonton, he caught his sleeve in the milking machine and broke his arm. Judy remembers Mum taking us to town one day and the car door flew open and out fell John onto the road, as there were no car seats and seat belts in those days. When we moved from Gordonton to Oklahoma, we went to QQ Primary School, where at Oklahoma, us kids used to have to get up early in the morning and feed the calves before school. I used to get him up to help me and then get home in time to catch the school bus. On cold frosty mornings he would often go to school in bare feet, probably because he lost his shoes somewhere. We were real farm kids. Mum used to send us outside to play and we would go way down the back of the farm and probably get into all sorts of mischief. We had the most amazing grandparents, as we were the only grandchildren on Dad's side, and many of our holidays were spent staying with them in Dunedin, and also with Uncle Eric and Auntie Beth. And it's lovely to see 2 of our cousins here today, Paul and Lee and Sandra, as we haven't got many cousins, so it's lovely to see them come here today. And also at our Auntie Lenore's in Palmerston North. When he was very young, John used to fly down to Dunedin by himself. He loved to go to work with Grandpa at Blackhead. He was always Grandpa's boy. When he was about 9, he got lumbago and couldn't walk for about a month. Our mother used to have to carry him everywhere. In 1961, Mum and Dad bought their first farm on Tirau Road at Hanuera. John went to 3 different primary schools. It wasn't always easy with a surname like ours, and the boys got into many fights through getting teased, with most opponents coming off second best, to put it nicely. John and Jeff started playing rugby when they were still at primary school, hence the long association with the Hanuera Rugby Club. John was also a member of the Hanuera Boy Scouts. On one of these occasions at camp, he accidentally chopped his leg with an axe. John was never interested in school. I think he only went to school to eat his lunch and play rugby. As soon as he turned 15, he left school and went milking cows on a farm up the road from us, Ken Brown's. He worked there in the holidays. He used to ride his bike to work. One day he was riding home from work. He tied his shoes on the handlebars. They got caught in the spokes of the bike and sent him crashing head first onto the road. A tanker driver was going past and just happened to see something sticking out on the side of the road. It was John's head. He stopped, and here was John lying on the side of the road. He was so lucky he didn't get run over. He woke up in hospital with Mum sitting beside him, not knowing what had happened. Jeanette said she can remember going to visit him in hospital. She didn't recognise him at first, as his head was so swollen. Mum used to say that's why he was so forgetful, because of all the knocks to his head and later years in playing rugby. There was always plenty of rivalry between John and Jeff when they were growing up. In later years, when playing senior rugby together, the opposition soon knew when the Smellie boys were popping up the front row. When Don and I first got married, he came to live with us for a few months. He built a chook house and called it Bird's Eye View. He also spent a few months working in Australia, and there were times when he had no money or job and he just used to sleep under the stars, he told me. He had a variety of jobs, from working in the mines at Huntley to driving trucks. It wasn't long before he and Jeff were both driving for Wheelers. He did that for a number of years until Mum and Dad bought Rockfield Stuck. John decided to give up driving and help them on the stud. This is where he brought up his young family. And Judy just reminded me today that also John spent some time in the territorial in the army when he was not long after he left school. John went one better than Mum and Dad with 7 J's. Javan, Jan, Jacinda, Jody, Joshua, Jason, Johanna, his baby girl. Poor guy. He used to have 4 sisters telling him what to do, and then his 4 daughters doing the same. The girl said to me he used to relate one of them to one of us. And as Jody said the other day, probably getting henpecked and him not getting a word in edgeways. But he loved it, because he always came back for more. Mum and Dad were getting on in years. They sold Rockfield Stud to Judy and Danny. They bought 12 acres off Matapo Street, called The Patch, where they continued to race a few horses. John still helped out, but went back to driving trucks at Whelan's. He left Whelan's. He and Hina went to live in Perth, Australia for a couple of years. When they eventually came back to New Zealand, John went driving milk tankers for Wakaraa Transport until he became unwell. He and Hina enjoyed many trips overseas, visiting Jason and his family in England and Jody and her family in Melbourne. One of his great loves was this club. When he was getting on in years and continued to play, he said to me one of his ambitions was to play alongside his nephews, and that he did. Even when he gave up playing rugby, he still enjoyed going on many rugby trips with the boys. I think he used to cause more havoc or trouble on those trips than the young ones. John was also known for being late and getting lost. On one occasion, on a sponsors' night to Hamilton, where he and his nephew missed the bus home. Instead of getting a taxi together, they ended up coming home in separate taxis. But his greatest love of all, and I know that he is so proud of you all, is his family. Michelle and Todd were over in Australia at the beginning of February last year when John was in hospital, and they went to visit him They said he would talk with pride of his young family and grandchildren. And he also said that he would go walk about at night and come back and he would be locked out. And we just laughed and said that's not the first time he's been locked out. Sadly, we lost our eldest sister on John's birthday in 2011 in a freak car accident in Perth, where she had gone over to join her husband. The girls said Dad never liked to celebrate his birthday after that, as it always reminded him of Jocelyn's passing. Brother, it was hard watching you over the last few months as your health started to deteriorate. I know you felt the public health system here had let you down. On your last trip to Melbourne, where you had been getting treatment, it was devastating to hear that you had contacted COVID-19. John was a big man with even a bigger heart. We miss you dearly. I know that you will be celebrating and watching over us here. You have left a great legacy in your young family as they continue to grow and prosper. I just want to make a special mention also of Jodie and Jason, who can't be with us here, as Craig has mentioned, due to what's happening all around the world, especially Jodie, who went above and beyond on not only keeping her own siblings informed on what was happening, but also us in Melbourne at the time of John's passing, under such difficult circumstances. You are very much loved by all our family, including your nieces and nephews. There will only ever be one John boy. Rest easy, brother.
Now call on Jacinda to come up.
Is that clear?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Hi everyone, I'm Jacinda. I want to start by thanking you all for coming to celebrate this day with us. Thank you to the club, family and friends for all the love and support since we lost our dad last year and in making this day happen. Losing our dad last year broke our hearts. As I stand here today, I realise how fortunate we are to be able to have this memorial for our dad, especially with everything that is still happening in the world today. We are very lucky and proud to have John as our dad. There are not enough words to express his influence in our lives. It's hard to describe a man who was hard as a rock and soft as a teddy bear at the same time. Dad was no saint by any means. There are a lot of tales to tell, some good, some not so good, all seen and heard by so many who have crossed paths with him and have their own versions of events, which I'm sure we'll hear later. Dad started his family with my mum, Hina. He was 28 years old when the eldest, Javan, was born. As most of you already know, he went on to have a number of us, 7 children in total, along with all of us starting with the letter J. We also grew up with the surname Smellie, which was normal to us, but you would have the odd 1 or 2 kids that would give us grief about it. Dad always told us the name will only make you stronger. To be proud of your name. At the same time of this, he would have his fists come up in a fighting stance. This was one of many instances we got the toughen up motivational talks. He was right though, it's a name you won't forget easily. Dad was always working. He'd be gone before dawn and back before we went to sleep. We all know the tinkering of the teaspoon in his coffee cup, even the way he used to sip his coffee, which never changed over time. At night, before he'd go to bed, he'd do a head count to make sure we were all home. Wherever Dad was, he always had a child in tow as he worked. As a young child, I remember having my seat on one side of the tractor above the big wheel. Jodie was on the other. We'd hang on there till Dad was finished. Then, as we got older, we made our way to the back to help feed out the hay. The older you got, the more help you did doing jobs around the farm. We used to have to help move the horses from paddock to paddock. Dad had each of us kids blocking any gaps so they don't get through. And all we were armed with was a black plastic hose to wave around. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. And when it didn't, you could hear him coming. As a kid, it sounded like thunder when Dad was sprinting past in his gumboots after the horses that had escaped, yelling bleeps into the air. Those are fond memories now. We all loved running. We used to have races back from the shed to the house. Gumboots and overalls, it didn't matter. Dad would give us a head start. We'd be off with the wind in our hair, thinking we could win. And again, there was the thunder. Zooming past in his boots, egging us on as he left us in his dust. I remember when Dad would be approaching a big hill in the ute. We'd be on the back and tap the top of the cab, so he'd stop and let us off. Sometimes he wouldn't hear us at all, so we'd just have to make a jump for it. We knew better. We would run up that hill because Dad very rarely used the road made to go up it. Straight up the side he'd go, as if he were in his Whelan's truck. Dad hated us sitting in front of the TV. He would always tell us we need to be outside playing. So, every day after school, if Dad wasn't home before us, we'd get to watch some afternoon cartoons. But as soon as we heard the sound of his ute, I kid you not, the TV would be off in a flash and each of us would take off at high speed, all in different directions. If anyone knows Speedy Gonzales, picture that, but in numbers. One of Dad's favourite stories he liked to tell, and I won't use names, is when he saw his son coming up to the house through the stallion paddock after school. Instead of walking up the drive with his sisters, Dad would be laughing away while telling it, thinking his son would rather face a stallion than his sisters. I think Dad could relate having sisters of his own. Dad's favourite pastime was rugby, loyal to Hinuera forever and a day. Again, Dad would have some of us rugrats around while he did his trainings and played games. I remember only a few instances when I saw Dad waving his fist at the opposition. I'm not sure why I remember that, but as time went by, I thought it was normal and carried on. But as years went by and met people from our area, even from different towns, they knew the Smellies. And the first question would be, are you John or Jeff's? My first thought would be, I'm John's of course, I don't have blonde hair. Silly I know, but that was just my own thinking. I would reply and say, John's my dad, and smile. Then they would proceed with a rugby story or a story about how they knew the family. I would relay these stories to Dad, and he had that grin on his face, smirking, and he would then say that they were exaggerating it. Or his favourite, I don't remember that. Let's just say there are a lot of stories with tussling, to put it nicely. It seemed to me, after a bit of thought, our dad, through no intention of his own, found himself in a lot of mischievous situations. Dad always made time to call around to all of us. Wherever he was or wherever we were, he would always call. Maybe as we became adults, it was his own kind of head count. He still did subconsciously, to check up on all of us. Or he would drop in and stay for a coffee. He always seemed to turn up when we were baking, and he'd always leave with some goodies for his lunch or his much-loved teddy bear's picnic. He started to travel more when Jodie moved to Melbourne and Jason moved to Bristol with their families. He enjoyed the time to travel and spend time with them. Dad had 3 sons and 4 daughters. I think it was easier for him to accept when the boys brought home their partners. He thought that was the bee's knees. As for us girls, it was a bit more sensitive. He knew he had a challenge. He would say we had a short wick, stubborn, difficult, fiery, the list goes on, which I might add are all his traits. Eventually, he would rub his head, pinch the top of his nose, squeeze his eyes shut as if going through physical pain, sometimes give his eyes a good deep rub as if to pull them out and admit defeat. Our partners had no clue they were walking into a lion's den. Not till later did they realise when asked by others who knew Dad, "How'd you get past John Boy?" And thankfully, Dad made good relationships with them over time. He would either try to get them into trouble because he thought it was good fun, or go to their aid and defend them when he would see his daughters getting riled up, which he thought was funny too. I remember him saying, "You girls have all got good husbands," and that meant a lot coming from Dad. As time went on, he became a very proud grandfather of 23 grandchildren to date. His poonas, he would call them. He was known by a few names, Papa and Poppy. And again, he would do the same. Call in or visit, watch their sports games and come to school events. One comes to mind when he came with me to my daughter's school swimming sports. We were watching the juniors, and as little kids go, they were just learning to get their rhythm. One race began, and one child who was swimming really well started turning right. And all you could hear was Dad saying, "Look, that kid's got a broken rudder," chuckling away to himself. I looked around when he said that, not so quietly, because I wasn't sure if anyone else heard it. I turned around and told him, "Dad, you can't say that too loud." It wasn't bad, but it was one of those moments you were hoping the other parents weren't within earshot. The grandchildren became his number ones. He had the kind of relationship where he could give them grief. He loved poking fun at them, and at the same time, he was gentle and caring. He would always stick up for them when we were trying to discipline them. He would say to our kids, "I'm there, Dad. Do you want me to give them a punch in the nose?" That would make our kids smile. That was his go-to saying for almost everything. Punch them in the nose, along with his big mitts clenched, waving them around in the air. All his grandchildren liked that one. And the classic, pull my finger. This man loved to laugh. He always had one ready for the kids. As the older kids caught on, they would run off in the opposite direction. Then Dad would move on to the next unwitting child. He had plenty to choose from. Dad was rough around the edges. He was very humorous. He loved to have a good laugh. I know Dad is happy to be here in his old stomping ground with family and friends. I want to thank you all again. It's truly an honour to have our Dad referred to as a legend, and very humbling that you took the time to share this day with us. To think of our Dad and how you know him and how others knew him. To finish off, I want to say thanks to our Dad. Nearly there, sorry. Thank you, Dad, for being that strength for us, to have our backs and made us feel safe. Thank you, Dad. Thank you, Dad, for your honesty and high morals. Thank you, Dad, for teaching us to be humble, thank you, Dad, for loving us and being supportive and proud. Thank you, Dad, for the snapshots of life we can keep close to our hearts forever. Thank you, Dad, for being our hero. If he could pick a hero's outfit to wear, it would definitely be his hero gear. And as the saying goes, not all heroes wear capes. I love you, Dad.
Right, before I call our next speaker up, I think we've got Ted coming up from Whelan's. I'll just tell another little John Boy story. So this was back, I think, in about 1999, and we went on a Wellington rugby tour. Obviously a long way from home, we were bussing home. Long journey, and lots of refreshments, means lots of pit stops. At one of these pit stops, for whatever reason, John Boy decided to climb up the bank and then up the highest tree he could find. I was getting a bit concerned about what he was up to, so I went up behind him to try and get him down. It was like trying to coach a silverback gorilla out of a tree with a banana, except I had a can of Waikato. I said, "Come down, Uncle, before you fall." He looked over at me and said, "Grady boy, don't worry about me, I know what I'm doing." No sooner had he finished that and the branch he was standing on snapped than he fell. The only thing that saved him was the fact that he hit every branch on the way down, hit the bank on an angle and slid, ended up butt first in the drain. Everyone was horrified and thought that he'd really hurt himself. John, laughing his head off, rolled out of the drain, dusted himself off, grabbed another can of Waikato and jumped on the bus. And off we went. I'd like to call on Ted, come up, speak, thanks.
Welcome people, my name's Ted. I'm Ted Asma, I work for Whelan's. I've been down there for quite a number of years, privileged to work with John. I've got a little bit of a story here. You can hear me alright? JGF, the man with the ugliest smile, big grin, missing front teeth. He smiled every day he came to work, he just loved his job, eh? I spent many an hour discussing the rights and wrong of work with him over a few amber liquids. He worked for Whelan's for approximately 25 years on and off, what I can gather. Over 3 different occasions working for all the 3 generations of directors, Tom, Gavin and Shane. Firstly, I think he started his apprenticeship in the 70s. I'd not started there at the time, so I do not know much about the mischief he used to get back into those days. I imagine he would have started on an old common or something similar. I believe he went to work at Huntley or something like that after he left the first time. I first met him when he came back in the 90s. He got on the big gear working part-time, then after a few months went full-time. I believe he would progress to being an owner of the business, or so we thought. The story goes that he owned a Mercedes-Benz. Quite a feat in those days, he weren't many around. It must be true, as Shane tells it. He was sitting in Workman's one night having dinner with a lady friend. He says he heard this familiar sound, this chop, chop, chop. There was a truck coming down the street. Sure enough, there goes the old 113 spreader going down Broadway. Turns out this stiff was on his way home. As Shane was running dispatch at the time, he knew that he'd dropped him off at 5 o'clock. Turns out this was about 11:30. God knows where he came from, there was no KFC in town there back in those days. Pretty flash taxi though. It was not long after that he sold his shares and retired for the second time. He came back in the 2000s, once again starting part-time and then going full-time, once he realised the job was made for him. He was given a brand new Mercedes Ertiga 1528, the biggest four-wheel drive we had at the time. He was proud as hell and he kept it in mint condition. The problem was he made all the other boys do the same to their trucks too, saying they weren't looking after them, even though they had 10 different owners or 10 different drivers on them before they got handed down. This would drive most of the boys crazy. But he was good for the culture at the time, and he kept some of the young fellas in check, even though some said he was a great teacher, but only some. Anyway, he got this new truck, and Ozzy said he used to keep it clean inside and out. I remember I used to keep mutton cloth down in the workshop for rags. For those that don't know mutton cloth, it's a stretchy material that seems to cling to anything. John would use half a roll a week. I was asking the boys the other night what they think I should have said today, and they all started laughing, so I need to share their story. They were working in the Carter Holt bush farms, breaking in the land after the trees had been removed. One day they stopped for some lunch. John had a bit of a tummy rumble and decided to head behind a blackberry bush for a bit of relief. Next thing the boys heard this terrible scream. Thinking he had fallen down a tomo or something, a couple of them shot around to see if he was okay. Turns out he used mutton chops for more than just cleaning the cab. It turns out the mutton chops attracted a rather large piece of blackberry to itself, and as you can imagine, when he wiped, it gave him a second bumhole. They say there was blood everywhere. Apparently there were 6 blokes rolling around the ground in tears. Only one was in pain. Heaps of sympathy though, eh? They say he had trouble sitting down for the next couple of days. One of the last times I saw John was a little town called Inverness, a couple of hours south of Cairns, about the same size as T-Rail. I was heading to Townsville on some work and decided to stop for coffee, and I pulled into a car park outside this cafe. I got out of the car and I heard someone calling, "Ted, Ted." I turned around and I parked right beside John. What are the chances? He was there in his number ones going for a job interview. He was working in the sugarcane. We spent about 10 minutes on the footpath yakking, then we went our ways. It was a pity we didn't have a bit of spare time up our sleeves, because I'd love to catch up with him with a bit of a local ale in the local pub in the afternoon. It would have been great. Yeah. John was a great man, and it was great to know him and great to work with him. And that was a real pleasure. Cool as, thank you people.
I'd call on Danny. Danny, want to come up, have a chat, mate?
Yeah, yes, well, I think people are sick of hearing me. John Boy, Blackjack, he had plenty of names. He loved his rugby. While playing for the under-21s, the players formed a close-knit and a successful team. The last season of the 21s, they went unbeaten and had 1 try scored against them all season. When moving up to the seniors, they were soon promoted up to Premier grade. Playing against bigger players, noting that the red players in those days played club rugby, they soon realised to be competitive, they had to change things. We developed a scrumming technique that proved very successful. They soon got a reputation of one of the best scrum packs in the Waikato and a tough forward pack. John and Jeff were the key components of that scrum. Opposition teams tried to disrupt the scrum but weren't very successful. John and Jeff made sure of that. Only people that were involved in those scrums knew what went on. No cameras in those days. At that stage, Waikato held the Round 30 Shield. George Simpkin was their selected coach, and he often took John over to Waikato training to help them with their scrummaging. John was selected for Waikato, but he turned it down because Hindura were playing man-to-mouth, and that was more important than playing a red game. There were heaps of stories could be told about John on and off the paddock. I remember one of them, hearing him tell the ref to change his whistle, as the one that ref was using blew automatically. On rugby trips, he often got lost. On one occasion, he thought he was in Hastings, and in fact he was in Napier. He had to get a taxi to go back to Hastings. He abused his teammates the next morning. They didn't tell him which town he was already in. After training, we used to train at the park in those days. We used to run around the streets of Matamata for fitness, to keep our fitness up. And John, Jeff and Lofty used to be always the last to get in. Anyway, suddenly John and Jeff used to arrive about halfway through, and I thought, gee whiz, they're finally getting fit. So one day, Judy and I went to see Auntie Rata who lived in Smith Street, and she said, "Oh, it's nice that the boys come and see me every Monday, Wednesday night." And I said, "What time?" And they said, "Oh, just after 9. And what they were doing, that while the boys were running down Smith Street and through town, they were having a coffee and then take the shortcut home. And another story, John saw a pair of gumboots at the outside the changing sheds, and he thought it'd be a hell of a joke, so he peed in them. And then he got all the young guys, because he used to get all the young guys to follow him, and he said, "You pee in it too." And then he goes into the changing shed laughing like hell, what a joke, till they told him that they were his gumboots. Everyone in the rugby fraternity knew John Boyd. Now, John's other love was his horses. When his parents brought a stud, they called it Rockfield Stud. He helped them run that stud, where they stood several stallions. They also raised several horses, which they bred and brought. John used to take them to the track every morning, where they were trained by Mike Moroney. While the horses were being worked, John would go off yapping to everyone at the track. Like all racehorse owners, they had some good ones and some donkeys. One mare called Peace of Mind is still alive at Rockfield today at the grand age of 29. Typical of John was always late. His sister Judy always went with him to take horses to trials and races. She tells the story of him taking a truckload of horses to Tiamutu trial. And Judy says, "Why are we going down Tower Road?" And he said, "Oh, this is the way to Tiara." But she said, "We're going to Tiamutu." And he said, "Oh, not much difference." He said, "Oh shit," he said. He pulls off the side of the road, gets the truck stuck, and they had to get a tractor to pull him out. Another day he was taking the horses to Avondale races. He got lost and ended up in K Road. John knew K Road quite well. Judy had to call out the window at the set of lights and ask someone, "How do we get back to Avondale?" The boys, Brent and Brian, were with John walking down the race at the stud one day, and John yapping away to them as he always did, and they asked him, "Where are we going?" as he had a lead in his hand and walking down the track. And he replied, "Oh, just taking this horse to the paddock." And the boys asked him, "Where's the horse?" And he forgot the horse. But that was John. Everyone knew John. Thank you.
Okay, next up to speak is Henry de Haas. Before he gets up here, I'll have to introduce him properly. Henry, or Lippy as we know him, he's probably played more rugby with John Boy than probably anyone. Needless to say, they're pretty great mates. I'll give you a little insight on how these two roll. Same bus trip back from Wellington as the tree episode. Lippy and John Boy were having a great debate about who was the fastest over 100 metres. So the bet was made, and as we rolled into Taupo, we all jumped out and lined the banks of the lake where the great race was to take place. As any true Hinny boy knows, you can't have a race on tour with clothes on. So these two old bulls stripped down and off they went. If you can picture two old buffaloes, one white and bald and one big hairy and brown, half running, half limping along the beach, that's the spectacle we got to witness. We were all too busy rolling around laughing to see who won that race. Lippy swears it was him. All I know is John Boy won the belly flop contest into the lake afterwards. Only probably was it landed in about 2 inches of water. There's never a dull moment with Lippy and John Boy on tour. Only reason I can tell these stories is because John Boy's not here to give me a hiding. Yeah, Lippy, you're up, mate. Thanks, Zinny, for the intro. Just had to, through the speeches, rearrange my few words. But anyway, we'll work through it, and it's a pleasure to be here. Can you hear me right there? A pleasure to be here. Speaking on behalf of the Hina Rugby Club, we convey our condolences to you, Hina, and your large whānau on the sad loss within our club and the sad loss in your family of John. It is important to us as a club to acknowledge and remember John Boy today. A huge kauri tree has fallen within our ranks, our Tāne Mahuta. And I don't say that lightly. I will elaborate as we go through. I won't be too long. There's a lot of pages here, but I won't be too long. John played for the club for 34 years. His last game when he was 50, and the year was 2000. His goal was to play in the new millennium at 50 years of age. I remember the game was Frankton Swarbrick Park, senior bean game, and so there he planned his time because he didn't play in 1999, but he came back for 2000. And nothing particularly happened that day, but he achieved his goal. So he's 50 in the year 2000. He did play with Javan, as is already said. John and I actually played together for 22 years. And thinking of the rugby playing days and all the people I and John have played, well, I have played with, John stands head and shoulders above any other player that I've played with in the club. And as I talk to other people, they would regard in our era the same way. I have listed his attributes. 1, his playing ability. 2, being an enforcer and a dominant figure on the paddock. 3, his club training nights. And 4, his antics on the field. Legendary. His playing ability, I'll go through 1. John led from the front row, never took a backward step, always commanded and committed at trainings. John and Jeff's scrummaging techniques were second to none. Kiwi Sarang came to one of our trainings quite a few years later. He was a Waikato prop at the time and played there for quite a while. And he mentioned that John, in particular John, could have easily played for Waikato and that he was one of the best at the time in Waikato. John had a very fast sprint on him for a prop. He always amazed me, but he'd get bouncing along and he was good. And he also had great ball skills for a prop. Being a dominant figure. Well, in those days, if you had any problem with a person amongst the players, you'd sort it all out between you. Danny Moss, I can remember saying a few times when I was 2 years with Danny as assistant coach, and he said, well, if you come off the field and you haven't got any sprig marks on you or no bruises, you haven't played a game of rugby. When I started playing seniors in 1979, John and Jeff in the front, Nigel Gray tight head prop, Murray Williams and I were the locks. We'd start the game, and about 3 scrums into it, there'd be a stand-up punch-up just about every time. And me and Muzz would just look on, wait for it to settle down, and then the game would flow quite nicely after that. The Smellie boys were recognised not to be messed with in Waikato rugby. Muzzer Williams said to me he felt his playing days were extended with John Boy being on our side and protecting him on the way through. Pat McGrath, the coach at the time, reminded me of one particular instant. As John Boy was loose head, he saw lots of tight head props come and go at the time. We had this new prop come, Peter Knoll, a sheepdog, is his nickname. Sheepdog was in the front row tight head, and the opposition loose head was given heaps of problems at the time, and John Boy just watching, and eventually John Boy got sick of it, so he got to sort the problem out. So he took a swing at this fella and he missed, and he hit Sheepdog in the nose. He broke his nose. And anyway, there was blood coming out of it, and then Sheepdog gets up and says, "Hey, John Boy, you broke my nose. How the hell did you do that?" John Boy just says, "Well, you'll be right, mate. There's plenty more blood from where that came from." I clearly remember, as he mentioned Buck Anderson, there was one other time, he must have hated playing Henuera because he was a big Waikato lock. At Bedford Park, he didn't even make half time. He came off with 2 black eyes. Shit, it was funny. Well, I don't know what happened, but you just stand back and these things just sort of happened all the time. As a team, we used to get penalised a lot. So our coach, first coach that I had with Danny Moss was Cecil Lowe, and then later on Pat McGrath. Through their wisdom, they decided to get a referee at one of our Monday night trainings to check it, see what we're doing wrong with our misdemeanours. Graham Allen at the time, a local ref, he was one of the first division refs, and he'd come along to trainings and he'd say, well, do this and do that, and the boys would do that, and nothing much would change. Later on, when Graham Allen he kept carried on refereeing, and later on he came at the odd time to training just to try and sort us out. And he actually then had enough courage to say, well, if there's a scrum and a line out, and if there's a problem there, it's generally got to be caused by the Smellie brothers. So, John Boy's club training night. John was generally one of the last to leave. Always enjoying a beer, comradeship, never one to miss out on some fun. John had to toss up many a time when he would go home earlier and have a nice tea that he had prepared for him, or stay just that little bit longer and finish his conversation with the boys. He mentioned several times how well their dog looked. Shiny coat and all. The dog lived quite well off John Boy's teas. Hina had a plan though. She was pretty cunning, old Hina. Oh, I'm going to send John Boy with 3 kids at training, or 4. He'll come home early. Yeah, that might have worked the odd time, but generally not. They got quite used to sleeping in the club rooms here. So, but John Boy, he was a considerate dad. It got cold in the winter time and had the ute there. He'd go out at whatever time. He'd start the ute up and get the heater going so the kids would be nice and warm. So then he'd come back and finish his conversation off. I'll talk in conversation, I won't say beer. But anyway, the kids were happy as Larry. One day, he got out ready to go home, and he walked out. Generally, he parked out over this side here, and his ute was gone. John Boyd never got flustered. This day, mate, he was flustered. He had kids here that were out of the night, lost his ute, stolen ute. He came in here panicking. And the boys said, geez, that's a bit tough, that's no good. Jesus, John Boyd. Old Joe 90 had conveniently shifted his ute around the other side. Yeah, he was a happy chappy. He could have kissed Joe all over. His funny times as well. We were at training one night, and this young Pākehā fellow, I'll call him a white fellow if you're allowed to, or we are at this club, he was going on about coloured people. And John Boy, always being diplomatic, listening first, absorbing the information, and then he thought about it and then he would reply. And as we know, John Boy was quite darkish in skin. Today I'll call him black. He'd given us a lot of thought. He said, look, young white fellow, Pākehā fellow, a couple of things you ought to know. Firstly, when I'm born, I'm black. When I grow up, I'm black. When I get sick, I'm black. And when I'm in the sun, I'm black. When I'm cold, I'm black. And when I die, I'm black. But you, young Pākehā white fellow, when you're born, you're pink. When you grow up, you're white. When you're sick, you're green. When you go out in the sun, you're red. When you're cold, you're blue. And when you're scared, you're yellow. And when you die, you're purple. And you got the cheek to say or talk about coloured people. That's actually a little joke, but John Boy would come out with that. There are antics, there are many. I'm sure anybody that's played with John Boy would know of several instances. I had another one just reminded me, I didn't go too long. Anyway, John Boy started up the front row club. And you had to be tough in that club. What he started up is that if you had something that needed stitching, we had a couple of vets playing for us at the time. So the vet stitched us up with no anaesthetic. So anybody wanted to be in the front row club had to go along with that. No anaesthetic, and the vet stitched them up. And that did happen. I think there was 3 or 4 who were brave enough to have a go at it. Zinny touched on the story from Wellington. Shit, it was funny. When he fell out of that chair, I can remember Owie being on all fours on the steerix, hysterically laughing. And then John Boy comes up with the stupid idea of to go and run 75 metres. And that was all fun and games. Yeah, okay. And the rule was we just pulled in before on the beach front at the whole one at Taupo, the beach, the lakefront, sorry. at Taupo there. And as Zinny said, they measured it all out, and all the boys were there. We went for our swim because we both did it. And Zinny said, he took this face plant in water, and it was only 6 inches of water. All I could see was 2 white cheeks sticking out of the ground. Anyway, we shook ourselves off. And there's one thing you didn't mention. I didn't remember this place clearly, Zinny, this part. We got out of the water. And then we look around and where's our clothes gone? And all the boys had pissed off in the bus and moved down the road. So by that time there was John Boy and I standing there, and we had a bit of an audience. I remember clearly a lady standing there with the kids, and mate, all of a sudden going from fun to quite a bit of embarrassment actually. So we had to, the bus was way up there, so we slowly had to walk up there, and we finally caught up with them. But it was a hell of a fun. Summing up, for many rugby players, that John Boy is a special place, has a special place in our hearts. Not to be forgotten, many fun and good times had. Thanks to you, John Boy, for many great memories for us all. Rest in peace, the Annual Rugby Club. Thank you. You still didn't win that race, did you, Libby? Just at this point, I'd just like to mention that at the end of the proceedings here, the family would like to welcome everyone to come into the club for a drink and something to eat, carry on some stories. But yeah, this time, if anyone does want to get up and speak and say something special, then yeah, just come and see me, and we'll have the mic there. So yeah, we'll just shut everyone up and you can have a talk. So I want to get a few people out of the sun. Yeah, so now I'd just like to call on my dad, Don. He's going to come up and read a poem that he wrote about John Boy some 20 odd years ago. So, yeah.
Can you hear me? You can't worry, but never mind. He was born one morning, it was pouring with rain. He put on his footy boots and went to the game. When he came home, there was mud on his knees. He kicked down the door and yelled, "Where's my team, Big John?" When John was little, he'd play anywhere. As long as he was in the team, he just didn't care. When one day the coach put him in the front row, and the legend of Big John just started to grow. Big John. He didn't always play by the rugby rule book, and when an opponent got his big left hook, his reputation grew as he went up through the grades, and some teams defaulted. They were so afraid of Big John. When John made seniors, he was still a lad. The opposing prop said, "I'm going to hurt you, Dad. You'll wish you'd stayed home with your mum and your dad, Big John." The very first scrum, John slammed him down, and that made the older guys start to frown. The next scrum, he popped him through the top like a cork and yelled, "I'm going to eat you with my knife and fork, Big John." John kept growing, not tall, but wide, and his skin was like rhinoceros hide. We were real glad he was on our side, Big John. John hated summer because he couldn't play, so he tried to keep fit in other ways. One day the town heard a hell of a band. John was beating up a whole biking gang, Big John. Over the years, John continued to play, and he met Hannah, and they married one day. John must have done what everybody did. Must have done it well, because he got 7 kids, Big John. John was dark, and his hair was black. I guess that's why they called him Black Jack. He didn't watch the Boltons, so he couldn't get in the week when they nicked on him after that sissy, John Boy. The All Black coach called John Boy one day and said, "We like your style, boy, we want you to play." John said, "Maybe, I'll call you back, but you'll have to change your colours to gold and black, Big John." John played rugby like a mean machine, and some folks said he drank Vaseline. Well, that's real stupid, because we all know the only thing he ever drank was Waikato, Big John. Some broken down players were on sea fishing, one of them said, "Let's make the top division. We'll buy all the clubs, that'll be a breeze, and we'll win the competition with ease." Forget about the guys coming up through the grades. We'll bring in the best and they'll get paid. We'll just concentrate on the senior team and we'll go to the top. What a wonderful dream. So they got the clubs together, had their say. Only Henry Harris said, no bloody way. We'll give rugby to all who want to play, like Big John. So the new team was formed and it went to the top. When you get up there, you can only drop. And sure enough, that team's on a slide. There's no loyal players like Big John on their side. So, John, you're a hero. The king of the pack. You've given so much to the Gold and Black. So many memories. Now it's time for us to say goodbye. But John, you're a legend, and legends never die. Big John.
Right, we're nearly there. Okay. I had Henry to ask me the other day, how would you sum up John Boy? At the time, I didn't really know how to answer that, but after giving it a bit of thought, I came up with this. He was a legend. Tough man with a big heart. He's a big man with a big heart. If he didn't like you or something you'd done, you knew it. If he liked you or loved you, you knew it. Not by telling you, but by showing you. It's just the way he was. His family was the centre of his world, especially in these later years. He was immensely proud of all of his children and grandchildren. They were by far his greatest achievement. I know all you kids and grandkids knew how much he loved you, and I know he knew how much you loved him. I'm certain he's watching over you all, and his legacy will live on through you, his family. Rest in peace, Uncle John. So that's it from me. I'd just like everybody that would like to do a guard of honour for John, just to make your way down to the middle of the field, and the family are going to carry John through the middle here and then round through the posts and down the centre of the field. So if anyone would like to move, do that now, please, that'd be great. Thanks.
Just sorting everyone.
Yes. Oh, I was going to be really late if I didn't stop it.
So we walk here.
Hi, I just want to say hi to our daughter Jodie and our son-in-law Scott and the children.
That's why we're going to get something.
And to Jason and Rosie and the children. Sorry you can't be here with us today to enjoy this beautiful day. To Janice and Barry and your children, I know you've been watching. Our heart was with you guys too. Thank you.
Hello, excuse me everyone. Just one thing I forgot, can please you all get up here and sign the memorial book just by the door up here please before you leave. Thanks very much.
Oh my gosh, do I just look like
We're going to sign out here.
I said, after today, I can shave it. And then
time to you can say. It's not easy to
How are you? Hello?
That's such a big family.
Give your hugs. So you have to come down low.
Yeah.
How's your grandbabies?
Beautiful. Three from Melissa and they come.
Nice.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah.
Donnie. Come here. Nicholas, the youngest, he's 19. So you can have it something like
Oh, you've been there ever since I see you.
He found the bird like straight away.
Oh no, she's there's a box got no house on it. So we'll live across the road, the guy's on the block, and he wants to give us a word. Hey Ross.
The sun was getting closer and closer.
How you going? Good. You're still competing? Yeah, they got repairs. Yeah, they're having a good lunch tomorrow. St. Peter's in this. Libby's going to Norwich.
You get it paid to go in the next? Oh, yeah, what is it? So many things.
I asked my mother I asked my sweetheart what lies ahead. Will we have rainbows day after day? Here's what we must do. They said the future's not ours to see. They asked their hopes what will I be happy? Will I be rich? They said